Most people overpay for car insurance, not because they're careless, but because switching feels like too much hassle. That's why there's Jerry, your proactive insurance assistant. Jerry compares rates side by side from over 50 top insurers and helps you switch with ease. Jerry even tracks market rates and alerts you when it's best to shop. No spam calls, no hidden fees. Drivers who save with Jerry could save over $1,300 a year. Switch with confidence. Download the Jerry app or visit jerry.ai/Libsyn today. That's JERRY.ai/LIBSYN.
Hey, it's Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. Now, I was looking for fun ways to tell you that Mint's offer of unlimited premium wireless for $15 a month is back. So I thought it would be fun if we made $15 bills. But it turns out that's very illegal. So there goes my big idea for the commercial. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3 months, $90 for 6 months, or $180 for 12-month plan required. $15 per month equivalent. Taxes and fees extra. Initial plan term only. Greater than 50 gigabytes may slow when network is busy. See terms.
Historia Canadiana is recorded on the unceded lands of the Kanien'kehá:ka First Nation.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Cultural History of Canada, the show where we release things every once in a while when we feel like it, apparently.
At this point, yeah. We're busy, man.
It's fine. No one is clamoring to the point where we need to release ones that often.
Well, that's the nice thing about doing a podcast about literature from over 50 years ago, you know? There's no hot takes and controversial topics to be discussed. It's already been a good 70 years. People have cooled off pretty well on this stuff.
You sure about that? Today we're talking about a Jewish author who went to Israel. Do you think there's no controversy?
I mean, we could talk about that if you want to. If you think either of us is qualified to discuss Israel-Palestine relations and issues.
No. And anyway, it wouldn't have come up to him specifically. So in this case, it's not particularly relevant. Anyway.
If he says so. To be fair.
So today we're doing a bit of a profile of an author who was very well known and is rather influential for his legacy on Jewish Canadian writing overall. So we've done an episode in the past, I don't know if you remember, on early Jewish Canadian writing.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you remember like what the broad lines of that first generation of Jewish Canadian writers were, like that we talked about?
No.
Right. In short, it was a community that has always existed in some way, shape, or form in Canada, but most of that early writing was very much centered, as you would expect, around small communities and very much centered around education and activism, right? So that kind of overlap was very clear in early Jewish Canadian writing, especially in metropolitan centers like Montreal, Toronto, etc. Right? And that would have been like the late 18th, early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th centuries.
Yep.
In one of your many CanLit classes, I would be very surprised if you hadn't heard of Klein in some way, shape, or form.
The name rings a bell.
Yeah. He's probably the most well-known Jewish Canadian writer of his time. Probably second only to today someone like Mordecai Richler, I would say. Especially as a writer who puts that Jewishness forward, because there are other writers that were Jewish, like Leonard Cohen, for example.
But it's not integral to their writing.
Right, exactly. Some writing, but not necessarily all.
God, we're going to be getting close to Richler soon, aren't we?
Yeah, for sure, because he would publish his first novel in what, the 50s? Late 50s?
Yeah. We're going to have to do a couple episodes on him, aren't we?
Oh, sure. We could also do like individual episodes on certain novels.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Because they're each worthy of unpacking in and of themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, you probably Klein's most famous work, and we're not going to talk about it necessarily in depth today, is The Rocking Chair, which is probably the main poem that would have indicated Quebec's shifting place within the Canadian sphere from his perspective, from Klein's perspective, and the rocking chair is symbolic of that swaying back and forth. So that would have been a very well-known poem of his. But he had a decades-long career as a poet and eventually a novelist. And so this is very much something that we can talk about, of course. Yeah. What do you know anything about, I guess, the state of Jewish Canadian peoples by the late 1920s, which is the point at which Klein would have emerged as a writer?
I mean, I know it in the way I know general history, in that in the Western world, it was not a good time for Jewish peoples, especially at the end. Not so much through the 20s, but as you get through the end of the 20s into the early 30s, rises of fascism, and sort of the anti-Semitic prevalence really on the rise as well.
Absolutely.
I know we've talked about it before, we've touched on it, but I think so it's not going to be a very positive presence. Yeah.
That's pretty much, that's a good place to start. What's interesting is that where in the 19th and early 20th century, a lot of the Jewish communities, like I mentioned, would be rather insular, right? And a little bit more close-knit, which again makes sense for a lot of immigrant communities. That's how you end up with Little Italy, Little Greece, Little et cetera, and so forth.
Well, it's also, a lot of them got sort of told, you got to live here first when you get here, blah, blah, follow these things, do this stuff.
Yeah.
You can only work these jobs.
Yes. And you still see that to some extent. For example, if I take my Montreal example, you have sections that are still very predominantly Jewish.
Or associated with Jewish.
Exactly.
I mean, Westmount, as a sort of neighborhood, borough, whatever you want to call it, very much was associated for a while. Less so these days.
Yes.
But for a while was very much associated with Jewish community.
Exactly. Now you see it mostly. What's it called? Outremont, for example. That area is considered like very, very Jewish.
I used to drive by the Jewish school while I was working.
Right. But it's during this era, right, during the 1920s and 30s, that these areas would establish themselves as cultural centers, right? Where you saw the rise of things like the Rialto Theater, if again taking the more local approach, established food sectors, etc. And that you see the integration from a literary perspective of Jewish philosophies, ways of writing, if they're influenced by things like the Talmud and so on, that very expressive and oral type of tradition, very singing of Hebrew as a language. It's a very singing is not the right term. What's the term I'm looking for? Have you ever heard Hebrew being spoken? It's very
the not chanting really, but prayer.
Yeah. I guess you could say like prayer-like elements. What you start to see is that in the 1920s, with modernist aesthetics coming on the rise in Canada, you see the integration of these kinds of aesthetic sensibilities into poetry, both by Jewish writers and people who were in those circles. And I think you see that in Klein's work as well. So we might have mentioned Klein in the past, mostly because he was well known here in Montreal as a student at McGill University, and he participated in the creation, and he was part of the circle of the McGill Fortnightly Review, which also featured poets like Leon Edel, Leo Kennedy, F.R. Scott, A.J.M. Smith, Dorothy Livesay, all of whom became flagships of Canadian modernism. And so he would have been participating in that kind of
A
discussion.
a very popular emerging field. These are the rock stars of their day, you know.
I don't know if I would go to say rock stars, considering how little they sold. They're retroactive rock stars.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean, you know. They were probably living their bohemian, hedonistic lifestyles.
Yeah, in some ways, wanting to light fire up the blood of Canadian literature, and they succeed. So it took them a while, certainly. So yeah, and funny enough, even though Klein was interacting with that group, he actually never published in that official organ, the Fortnightly Review, because he refused to change the word soul in his single submission for publication. And so it was rejected. So it's really interesting that you see in the beginning, right, these ideological commitments, both from the editors of the Fortnightly Review clashing with other commitments that are considered unpoetic, right? Like the use of the
not fitting in the agenda or the tone or whatever, you know.
exactly. A lot of the editors, we'll say guys here because they mostly were men, were more atheistic, and modernism in and of itself was not necessarily a religious thing. Usually it was very anti-religious in many ways. And so the very notion of soul would have been antithetical to
You know,
to
we love
one of them.
our periods of because that's another thing that was around at the time, wasn't it? Objectivism and trying to
Yeah,
do this whole thing of like,
I
oh, we're
I
gonna
feel like
be
a lot of it came
scientifically
out later.
minded.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
remember we
that makes
talked
sense.
about that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like that came out a little bit later, but it would have been right around this time, certainly. Yeah. Your Ayn Rand types. No, that's not the same thing, but I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the idea is still similar though, in that people, yeah. And again, it's always just going to be the way of publication.
hmm And as an editorial mandate, I understand you want to have a vision, but to reject someone because of the use of a specific word kind of sounds
Oh,
hollow.
that reads to me like there was something else going on.
Yeah.
If he's also working at the Fortnightly Review, he pissed somebody off.
He pissed somebody off, he was hard-headed, or something was not going right. Yeah.
He spilled coffee on some guy one day. Who knows? But like, 'cause that's the kind of petty bullshit that would seep into there.
The official reason is that the editors considered it insufficiently modern as a term. But yeah, that sucks. Also, I feel like the soul is such a modern concern. Like, obviously, it's been a concern for a long time.
Well,
To say
that's
that
just
soul
it.
is
It's
not a
'cause
modern concern is bullshit.
even in a lot of modern texts, they're always harping over the condition of your soul in the sense of like your moral deterioration in the face of the oncoming onslaught of the capitalistic system or whatever, you know?
Mhm. Industrial modernity, so on and so forth.
Yeah, heart of darkness, blah blah blah. So I feel like the harping. I know we're harping on this ourselves on this decision about the word soul up, but
That
it
matters
just
not
feels
at
like a
all.
weird. Well, it really gets to the soul of the issue, doesn't it? I do my best, man.
No, but you're right. But it does also go to show what Klein was interested in, right, as a
Mm.
poet. And it is something that would really stick with him for most of his career, right? This
And that's what we
search.
appreciate about him.
Yeah, no, certainly. I think it's a very difficult thing to do, especially in both modern poetry and modern times, to find that balance between aesthetic imagination, um, search for things like a soul, and not necessarily being overtly pedantic and religious about it. So
Do
I
you
think he
believe in
does a good job.
souls?
Are you asking that seriously or as a kind of joke?
Oh, both. Both.
Yeah. I would say on some level, but not in like in the physical sense that like there's a ghost that exists within you, right? But the basic driving force, right? Whether
Yeah, I
it's an
believe we
aesthetic
have a
concept.
soul insofar we have like a thing that is the core of us that are like added our emotional being.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the soul of me is like partially like dumb jokes and puns, and that's just part of Soul of You is, academic elitism, and that's just who we are.
This is something that like goes back to ancient Greek philosophy or even further, where it's like there's just something not quite identifiable. Right? There's a little je ne sais quoi that exists in people. Yeah.
And I'm sure that, we could get scientific explanations for all this and blah, 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 but
I think it's a thing that makes us human.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Now, because I can see here in the notes.
Yeah.
We're about to talk what I think might be one of Patrick's most favorite books ever.
Sure.
Which book is this that Klein read?
So right around this time, he would have read James Joyce's Ulysses.
What's James Joyce Ulysses? This is me giving you a chance to give your own little impassioned rant.
I wasn't actually going to go on an impassioned rant because I've talked about it on this show before. So basically the modernist text, if you want to put it that way, or at least it is now. At the time, people were critical of it, and
it's a weird book. It's a very weird book.
People like Virginia Woolf lambasted it, and it's not quite the same modernism as something like Conrad's Heart of Darkness, but it's often seen as the
Joyce is Irish, so people didn't really like that.
Yeah, that. But yeah, it's considered this modernist text because it represents everything that modernism as a literary movement was leading up until that point, and very much almost represents that transition into postmodernism on a literary level, where he's actively playing with what the text actually is, which a lot of people weren't doing up until that point. So Ulysses came out in 1922, written by James Joyce, and it's basically the day in the life of Harold Bloom, this middle-aged Irish kind of nobody, right? This average Irish bloke who's having wife problems and is just facing the existence of being Irish in the 20th century.
Yep.
And the book mirrors in many ways, actually this is topical, the journey of Odysseus back home. Right? And so
because
each
Ulysses
chapter
is the Latin name of Odysseus.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Right. No, that's good. And each chapter represents a different trial that Odysseus would have gone through, right? So Nestor,
but in a modern turn.
Exactly. So it replays some classics while trying to modernize them, and very much plays with what the text is and how that prose is approached, right? So famously, the last chapter,
it's written very weirdly.
But that's the thing; it doesn't start off weirdly. It starts off as like a Henry James type of dense prose novel, and then it very quickly veers off the rails.
Well, yeah, even Henry James is weird writing.
Yeah.
God, Henry James.
I love Henry James.
I think it's more just the problem of the guy I had for my modernism class I didn't like so much, but whatever.
Yeah, that'll do. Yeah. Anyway, so famously, just to give the example, Ulysses has music annotations in the middle of it, and the last chapter is a 50-page chapter that is a single sentence, and it's the ramblings of Harold Bloom's wife having basically an ecstatic imagining of her life. So it's that kind of weird.
And for anybody who's ever had to read a very long sentence, reading one sentence over 50 pages is the weirdest headache you will ever get.
Yeah, that's right. I think the only reason I appreciate it is because I took a whole course on it at Concordia, right? We had the time to examine it in depth and take the time. It is a very dense and complicated.
Well, it speaks to, and you can see why Klein would lock onto that, because that's literally how some films and novels are made. They are made to be studied with that is the intention in mind. Yes,
very much so. And it wasn't it. I think I don't know if you'd be able to confirm this. Wasn't this the one that Joyce was saying in his personal his personal notes that this is the text that people will be looking at for 100 years and still not figure out.
Oh, I think I've heard that because I've never
Yeah.
actually read the book.
Right. Okay.
Because I, it's not a book you read recreationally
No, not really. Not unless you're a psycho.
or an actual academic.
Yeah, exactly. It's either, he either said it about Ulysses or his follow-up, Finnegan's Wake. I forget which one it was. It was for.
Oh yeah, he did do Finnegan's Jesus.
Which is even worse. Anyway, but also I feel like
You can see why Klein would latch on to this because it provides a level of adventure and pageantry to a sort of representation of a peoples that are traditionally very put down upon.
Yes.
So there's a lot there to empathize with.
Yeah. And the whole point behind Ulysses is that Harold Bloom has difficulty going on a journey. He never leaves Dublin. It's like he goes on like a journey of 2 square blocks, basically. Yeah. Someone has
It's an adventure of the mundane.
Yeah. Whereas the whole history of the Jewish people is exile. Right? Like literally from a biblical standpoint, and then all the way
insofar that they, like, for thousands of years we considered them nomadic peoples.
Yeah, nomadic peoples, or were forced out of certain places.
Yeah.
So
and especially with what was happening at the turn of the decade.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And what was going to happen 20 years from when Klein read it, right, where they were restricted in their movement in certain parts of the world. So this question of travel and journeying, both from the level of Odysseus, but also Ulysses as a text by Joyce, I think would have struck very true to a Jewish reader in the modern sense. So yeah, and it is something that you do see throughout some of his texts. Klein was actually someone who went to my alma mater, right? So he graduated from McGill in 1930, and he enrolled as a law student at the Université de Montréal. And he graduated. Yay! What? He never actually found the profession of practicing law particularly satisfying or even financially successful. He didn't.
That entirely reads as like parents were saying, "You're going to go study law."
Mm-hmm. Have a good career. Go
as a lawyer.
Yeah, and you see this in a lot of families, but also a lot of immigrant families specifically, right?
Oh, yeah.
Do better than what we did.
Yep.
And
forget the dreams.
Yeah, exactly. And so what's interesting is that while we would imagine the position of a lawyer as something that would allow someone like Klein to be a poet, it's kind of the opposite that happens. He doesn't make enough money as a lawyer, and so he can use writing as a way of supplementing his income, right? Which is very rare as far as like literary history is concerned. Usually all kinds of writers take menial jobs in order to do the writing, not the opposite.
Yeah.
Which I find hilarious.
Oh, it's hilarious, but it's a very interesting, like, again, it sort of explains the path that we're taking.
And
I just find it interesting when you hear these little quirks of journeys. You know, because it really goes to show this is what makes this author actually different. And this is what made this author successful. Because, we say, like, oh, you don't typically see. It's like, well, you typically don't see a lot of things in truly famous and successful people. They typically do not have the same thing as everybody else. That's what got them to where they are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's particularly true because so he started practicing law in 1933. So he would have been 23 at that point. In 35, he married his childhood sweetheart, had 3 children, like the whole family thing. And already
it goes to show people can't afford lawyers. It's just one of those things. Like the rich people who usually buy and use lawyers didn't have the money. They were in the midst of the Great Depression.
Yes, actually, that's very true. I didn't even click that it was the Depression era. Yeah, of course.
So no wonder you didn't get a lot of work as a lawyer.
Yeah, Actually, that makes a lot of sense. Although,
Meanwhile, his poetry, his entertainment sells because when you have nothing, you give the peasants circuses and bread.
mhm. But that's what's really interesting. He wouldn't have been that old, and already in 1936, someone. Shoot, I wrote down his name. Yeah, W.E. Collins wrote a study of Canadian literature called The White Savannas, and
The
he,
white savannas.
yeah, which is a bizarre name, but I get it, I guess. Um, but Collins actually praises Klein in it. So very early in his career, you already see critics identifying him as a poet of value and of importance enough to mention him within a study of Canadian literature broadly, right? Um, which I think goes to show just how much people appreciated him. And we're about to read one of his poems soon, because right around this time, he also published two poems in an anthology called New Provinces, which we would have mentioned in our episode on modernism. So a lot of those editors from the McGill Fortnightly Review that we were dunking on earlier published an anthology called New Provinces in the mid 30s. And so he came back and they accepted poetry for that.
Damn straight.
So I don't know if they were that antagonistic with one another at the end of the day.
I don't
Right.
think they were antagonistic. I just think it reads as editorial meddling.
Yeah, exactly. So he
Like
had two of
Spider-Man.
his poems published in, yeah, like comics. But the first one was called Out of the Pulver and the Polished Lens, and the other one, Soirée of Vevel Kleinberger. Do you want to read the Out of the Pulver and Polished Lens one?
Sure. I'll read
Or at
the
least
first
part of it,
stanza or
because
so.
it's pretty long. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll read the first section.
Yeah.
The paunchy sons of Abraham spit on the maculate streets of Amsterdam, showing Spinoza, Baruch alias Benedict, he and his God are under interdict. Ah, what theology there is in spatted spittle, and in anathema what sacred prose, winnowing the fact from the suppose. Indeed, what better than these two things can whittle the scabrous heresies of Yahweh's foes, informing the breast where Satan gloats and crows, that saving it leaves false doctrine jot and tittle. No vigilant thumb will leave its orthodox nose. What better than ram's horn blown? And candles blown out by maledictory breath can bring the wanderer back to his very own. The infidel back to his faith? Nothing unless it be that from the ghetto a soldier of God advanced to teach the creed, using as rod the irrefutable stiletto.
So obviously you see the very religious imagery.
Oh, yes.
Right from the
Very.
start.
Well, even just invoking the actual name of Yahweh instead of
Yes.
the Lord or anything like that is... Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
For those who don't know, that is the name of God, is Yahweh, as taken from when, as part of a pantheon religion thousands and thousands of years ago.
Right.
That's a whole different theology discussion.
Yeah, but isn't the idea that Yahweh is the name that we've received, right? Or that the Jewish people received, and it's not the actual name of God, it's only the one that was able to be written down, because the true
Yes.
name of God cannot be written down.
Well, and even
Something
when we
along
do
those
write
lines.
it down, it's often written without the vowels.
Yes, exactly. Right. So it'd be YHWH or something like that.
WH.
Yeah.
So
And
just
of
the
course-
idea of him writing out the full name of Yahweh in his poem is in of itself a very strong focus. Especially, yeah. It's a statement. It's a statement.
And in the third line in that first stanza, mentioning Baruch Spinoza, who was
That's what it is.
a very famous philosopher, theologian. He was Jewish, but he was rejected from his community because of his questioning of orthodoxy. Right?
Well, that's
or at
it.
least
That you can see
religious
this is very, very religious, but very Jewish religion. Sons of Abraham, Baruch alias Benedict,
Yep.
the use of Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
Or is it? Yeah, no vigilant thumb will leave its orthodox nose. especially like because when was this poem written?
So this would have been published in 36.
Yeah, like it's you can't have a phrase written by a Jewish author, very Jewish poem with a phrase like Orthodox knows without that meaning something.
Yes, exactly. The ram's horn, right, is
Yep, candles
very.
blown out.
Mhm. And so
Wanderer,
not
bringing
only
the
in the
wanderer back to
Depression,
his very own,
yeah, right, during the
unless it be
Depression,
from
as you
that
mentioned,
ghetto.
but I think also on the eve of World War II. So just the idea that there is this foreboding sense the Nazis would have already been in power at this
Oh
point.
yeah, in Germany.
Um, yeah, yeah. And so this explicit questioning of your faith, or at least putting front and center these types of questions that you wouldn't necessarily see if you were an Orthodox follower of the faith, right?
Well,
Um,
also you're questioning, but also the legacy of that
mhm.
faith. You know, the book ended. It starts with the Paunchy sons of Abraham, and then using as rod the irrefutable stiletto makes me think of like the old phrase "spare the rod" or "spare the rod,
Yeah,
spoil the child," or "spoil the rod, spare the child," something like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's something also interesting to
So it's a
me
very like
about,
generational.
yeah, which is very present in a lot of Jewish writing, right? Like the Kabbalah,
Oh
you
yeah.
see this a lot, um, the cyclical storytelling, extremely shot through in a lot of Jewish religious writing. There's something that jumps out to me in that first real word, not the Panchi. It seems almost um, flat as a term, which you wouldn't expect again from this type of writing. Someone that's or people that are so central to your faith, right? The sons of Abraham, Abrahamic religions, right? They are the
You
kind
could
of
say
focus point.
paunchy,
Yeah, to use
as if they
Panchi
have
as
a
something.
gut or a belly. But
Yeah.
then again, you're feeling spit on
Hmm.
the maculate streets, not the immaculate, the maculate.
Yeah. There's like this griminess to it that doesn't quite
He
fit.
and his God are under interdict.
Yeah.
So I think there's a constant thing going on right now of I'm not gonna say but this very self-awareness,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
of being under persecution,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
almost as if he's saying like, yes, this is how you see us. I know.
But also,
Orthodox knows, blah blah blah. Like,
and in many ways, it's a modernist manifesto, right? Both man and God are under interdict, right?
mm,
What does that mean when you're writing a modern poem to consider that? And putting he in this case, I think, is a very good act of like to have the lineation in a way where he starts the sentence and therefore capitalizes he in the same way that we would usually capitalize he if we're referring to God.
yeah.
Um, very
And then
good.
God is called still capitalized right afterwards.
Yes, yes, very, very good.
And then
Klein from a
something that
poetic way.
sort of jumped out to me was the sort of the because I'm trying to read it right now really quickly and see if I can, but the rhyming style, the rhyming scheme isn't it doesn't really almost have one. It's very sort of just sort of links with odd words here and there.
Yeah, A B B C
But
D
then
D C.
C E well D D C, but then it goes
Yeah,
down and it comes nose blown breath own faith.
yeah, it kind of collapses.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
I
breath
know.
and
I found it
faith doesn't
interesting when I
really.
was reading it. The deterioration of it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because you would think it would start off pretty consistently. I wouldn't be able to identify what rhyme scheme that actually was. Like if it does actually follow a scheme off the top, or like
Mm.
a named scheme, I should say. But yeah, even when you think it would rhyme breath and faith with the th, but then you realize it doesn't. At best, no, it wouldn't even be an I rhyme. So, and then nose technically, I guess, would
Rhymes with
rhyme with
crows
crows and
and
foes,
foes,
but
but then it's off on its own. I think it's
yeah.
interesting just because it's again, it's sort of if we're thinking generationally, showing the deterioration as time has passed through rhyme scheme, which
Yeah.
this is real like English nerd bullshit right now. I want to make that
No,
clear.
it's
Like,
good.
well, not bullshit, but it's like it's real. Like, this is the kind of stuff we were studying in university.
Yeah. And then we're not going to read the later stanzas, and I'll link to them in the show notes if people want to read through the entirety of it. But the rhyme scheme, even the form of the poem, doesn't follow in each section, right? Section 2 is a very short and direct type of rhyming and lineation, and then part 3 goes a little bit longer, and it goes back and forth like this throughout the poem.
And then, well, it's pretty short parts overall until you get to part 8, which is like long nonstop.
Yeah.
And it's like different line lengths and
Yeah, for sure. I wouldn't be surprised, considering his major work of prose fiction called The Second Scroll, if the fact that there is 9 parts has some kind of symbolic meaning, but I don't know enough about Jewish heritage to say that with any kind of certainty. But I know that numerology does play a big part in Jewish practices.
Well, there's so much so that there's like a special number system.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I can't speak to that with any kind of confidence, so it might be something worth examining, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Good. Nice stuff.
Yeah, there you go. The gematria.
Okay.
Gematria. The Hebrew numerology.
Oh, okay. Right. So after all this, right, Klein would continue basically to publish poetry here and there, but also he took on editorship positions, and he would actually keep one for almost 2 decades at the Canadian Jewish Chronicle. He would also use his skills to become a speechwriter and public relations advisor to Samuel Bronfman, who history nerds might know as the president of Seagram's, which was a very big, a very big company at the time. And Bronfman was also the head of the Canadian Jewish Congress, by far the most powerful leader of the Canadian Jewish community for over 30 years. Right, very active in the community as far as making Jewish people a part of mainstream Canadian society. And so it's interesting to see how Klein would have been close to this kind of Jewish activism and community building. Right, so you see again what's very much at the front and center of his interests, right, both as a poet and just as a person. Okay, his first actual volume of poetry that's not published in an anthology or in a magazine came out in 1940. And Mac, can you tell me where this title of his book of poetry comes from? It's called Hath Not a Jew. What does that sound like to you?
Oh my God.
You've read this before. I know you know exactly where Hath Not a Jew comes from.
I just can't remember. Like, it's killing my brain right now.
The most famous playwright of all time.
Oh, is this Shakespeare?
Yeah.
Is this Shylock?
Yeah. It's his famous speech.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's giving his angry monologue in the courtroom, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Right.
Love that play.
Right.
God, do I love that. It's there's so much to talk about with that play. Shylock is one of the literary characters of all time.
So without going too much into it, why do you think he would choose that as the title of his first poetry collection? What is the significance?
1940.
In 1940, right. What is the significance of that, especially that monologue?
Yeah, well, so give some context for everybody. Hath Not a Jew is a line from a monologue by the character of Shylock. Shylock is one of Shakespeare's most famous and controversial characters in any of the plays he's ever written. He is, by all accounts, the antagonist of the play Merchant of Venice. Is it Merchant of Venice? Yep, cool. I got that right. I get to keep my street cred. And it is a stereotype caricature of a Jewish man. And it's one of those ones that like people have gone back and forth on, and it's still discussed in academia. Is this anti-Semitic? Is it not? Was Shakespeare trying to make social commentary? Was he trying to do this? Because there's so many signs in the like Shakespeare truly was one of the, if not the greatest writer of all time, in the way he was able to manipulate wordplay and all that, with just how much was going on in that. And that monologue is at the end where Shylock realizes he's been played by the female lead, can't remember her name right now, and he is angry and saying, well, you cheated. I played by the rules. I did what I was supposed to do. I'm just trying to make sure I get paid for the thing I did. Like, your boyfriend here made a bad deal, and now he's getting bailed out of it, and I don't get anything. This is bullshit, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
And
it's
so
interesting.
It was the half not a Jew wasn't it something like that? Like he was saying, like, half not a Jew to be there for you're doing this or something.
But is that when like it features that famous passage where don't I bleed
beams
like
of
anyone
light
else?
will touch me.
Right, like if you cut me, I'll bleed. If you hurt me, it'll if you attack me, it'll hurt. Right? I have emotions.
Yeah, well, it recontextualizes a lot of the play.
Yes,
because it basically is like, oh yeah, he's like, yeah, he's a bit greedy, wanting his money, but it's just a business deal.
Yeah,
like,
that was the point.
The boyfriend fucked up. He made a bad investment. He has to pay out now.
Yes.
And he was an idiot. And so this is the whole pound of flesh, blah, blah, blah.
Exactly. What's interesting is that despite the kind of tragic, the very tragic ending of Merchant of Venice, from which he gets his title.
Yeah, the tragic ending for Shylock.
Yes.
And that's, again, what makes the play very, very interesting to study, is that it's, like, very tee-hee-ha-ha from, like, the young lovers characters. But then you look what happens to Shylock, it's like, oh my god.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that, so Shylock faces a tragic ending. Everyone else faces more of a comedic ending in that play, right? In the celebratory
traditional
sense.
Comedic ending of like, marriages and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. In the poems of Hath Not a Jew, Klein seems to be taking up the celebratory element that the other characters face while referencing Shylock in the title of the collection. And so there's this bizarre contradiction between the tone of the poems and the title that is referenced.
Well, that matches what he was doing in Out of the Pulver and the Polished Lens, though. The paunchy sons of Abraham, the orthodox nose, blah, blah. Like, it's very much that sort of grappling. It's, to draw a really bad comparison, it is very similar to when other artists, musical artists or whatever, will make use of stereotypes in their music, because it is their reckoning with their culture. Like, I can use this, I can say this, you don't get to.
Exactly. Even though it came out at a moment when it a lot of people didn't see it as appropriate. Right, the celebratory and optimistic vision of a lot of the poems didn't necessarily fit with the vision of the 30s and 40s that people would actually see in their real life. Right, and so it made it so that the poems didn't age particularly well for a lot of readers. Right, and even though it's probably his better collection of poems, right, it didn't receive the success that maybe it did in the long. It should have gotten in the long run. Right? But I do think you're right. Those contradictions are a feature and not a bug, to put it in computer terms. And gets it.
I know computers.
I know computers, that one thing. And I even included an example from a poem called Ave Atque Vale, which I'll read just again the first two stanzas, just to give people a sense of this hope. But yeah, for a lot of people, while they recognize the poetic beauty of it, it didn't necessarily have what they needed or wanted in.
Well, it's almost like he's trying to be funny.
Yes.
It's
So
almost, no churl am I to carp at the goodly fears, in the Mermaid Tavern, quaffing the lusty toast, myself twanged Hebrew to write English cheers, though now I do forbid farewell to mine host. And not in sooth for that I am a wight, of sober mien and melancholy way, drinking my water in sips, in life's despite changing the high nonny no to lack a day. Like, it's almost like he's trying to, like, set up a punchline here.
Yeah. And by the way, he references there's an epigraph from the Two Gentlemen of Verona at the beginning. So again, clearly thinking of Shakespeare. And I think he is trying
lusty toast.
Yeah, part of me wants to think that even in the language of the poem, he's trying to get at that comedic element that Shakespeare would often do in his songs. Right?
Well,
like if you look at a Shakespeare
that's
song,
sort of it. Like if he's invoking the bard, he is very much discussing or bringing up his ability to have these very, very, very layered meanings to his work.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like his even just the title, like Much Ado About Nothing.
Yes,
has about like 4 different layers to the fucking title of the play alone.
Exactly.
Involving gossip and musicals and all sorts of bullshit. And so
go ahead.
It's just very, very interesting, you know?
And
in the Mermaid Tavern, quaffing the lusty toast, myself twanged Hebrew to write English cheers, though now I do bid farewell to mine host. And not in sooth for that I am a wight. So like again, the very fantastical creatures and elements here, as if he's a Jew. He's almost this mythological figure.
But that's what I was thinking of, because what this reminds me of, if you want to keep making with the Shakespeare comparisons, which he wants you to make, right? In Shakespeare songs that are included in some of his poems, there is this kind of mystical quality to some of them, right?
Well, it's also, so this is a totally different track. And so, do you read a lot of fairy tales, like original, like Grimm's versions of fairy tales, original versions of fairy tales?
I've read some, but I can't say I'm like super well versed.
So a lot of the time in those, when there's like the shady businessman, do you want to know what they call them? The Jew.
Oh yeah, okay, of course.
So that's, in my mind, that's almost playing to that sort of, again, folkloric, fantastical fairy tale element. This idea of like, oh, just by being Jewish, I'm the magical trickster of the story now. Because that's often like the one who sells the beans or makes the deal a lot of the time. If it's not just Satan, they were called a Jew.
Right. Okay. Huh. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, he's playing, I guess, into the stereotype in this case.
I get to teach you something, though.
Yeah, but certainly he's playing into the stereotype in a way that I guess he's trying to take it back in many ways. Does that make sense?
Or reclaim.
Yeah. That's really good. Okay.
Intertextual referencing, baby. I swear to God, we're actually smart and know what we're doing.
So,
but again, it is very, very celebratory. Even in these first two, sort of, again, because even the start of that poem, the idea of everybody sitting at a tavern, and then he starts speaking, and it's like this celebration as if he's telling a story. That's a very traditional way to start epic stories and poems and all that. People sitting around and, I did this cool thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And the fact that he says specifically, they cheered when I spoke in Hebrew. It's like when I speak French in the classroom, the kids lose their shit.
Yeah, but there is something of an oddity to that. Right? You're playing into the hands of the expectation.
Well, it's something that it's exotic.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
Yeah,
that's sort of that perversion of the exotic, or I want to see the exotic. I want it to do tricks for me.
Yes. Yeah. So there
Again,
would be a kind
not
of
saying I've been heavily
bittersweet.
persecuted, but as like somebody who is immigrated and lived in a lot of different countries, there is very much that element.
It gets at that same, even if it's not persecution per se necessarily, it gets at that same drive or underlying idea. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You're gonna be sort of almost entertainment for us or something.
Yeah, for sure. And
not in a mean way, malicious, but
it's rarely maliciously intended, but it does come across as that sometimes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But even if you keep looking at the other ones, it just keeps going and like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like the other poem, very strong Jewish, like very strong Hebrew things. Ben Zakkai, Jabna Town, Pumbeditha, Sages of Sura. That'd be something else.
Yeah. References to the Talmud and so on.
Yeah, the Talmud of Abaya and Rabbah. Oh my God. Hillel instructing in oh wow. Yeah. So lots of big referencing going on. Like this was somebody who very much knew and celebrated his own culture and history.
And then did you read the very last lines? When he forsakes you, Shakespeare, for a space, or you, Kit Marlowe, the four good lines, or Johnson, you, your sack, your muscadine, your wines, this Jew betakes him no Pharisaic crew.
Did he just call himself a Pharisee?
This Jew betakes him to no Pharisaic crew. No, so he's dissociating himself from that. No?
Yeah, okay.
No Pharisaic crew.
Yeah, okay. So yeah. I see what you're saying now.
So he's saying like, don't you shouldn't associate me to these stereotypes like Shakespeare, Marlowe, Johnson did.
While also celebrating Shakespeare and
yeah, taking the good and the bad together.
Yeah. Well, it's also because Pharisaic directly related to the Jewish social religious group.
Mm-hmm.
Also has its own meaning of like self-righteous, hypocritical, overly focused on outer rules. So again, he's also being like, I'm Jewish. I'm not super focused on all this other stuff. I'm focused on the soul of Jewishness.
Don't call
to
me
be
a
non-modern with it.
Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. So Klein himself would kind of take a turn towards more serious creative writing. Right? While there is hope in those early poems that we were talking about, he would very quickly turn sour with the outbreak of World War II. Right? And a lot of the poems that are in Hath Not a Jew,
who wouldn't?
Yeah, exactly. A lot of the poems in Hath Not a Jew were written in the 20s and 30s before the outbreak of the war. And it just so happened that it was published in 1940, and so there is that clash, right? By public. Yeah, there is almost. Yeah, it's a publication accident that it would come out in such a contradictory fashion. But you can see that in 1944 he published works like Poems and the Hitleriad, and in 1948 The Rocking Chair and Other Poems, which won him the Governor General's Award. And even though the Hitleriad is obviously a play on Pope's Dunciad, which if you haven't read, listeners, you should. It's fantastic. It's hilarious. But he tries to pick that up again in classical reference and trying to lambast Hitler. And it doesn't quite work. Right? Even critics at the time were like, we get what you're trying to do. It just comes off as a bit awkward from a poetic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, again, it's really like truly great satire requires a level of understanding and appreciation of the thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like it's like the best satire has some form of recognition of oh, the heart of this thing is this, and it's not necessarily all evil. And that's what makes sort of any satirical things about Nazis and Hitler in that time period have to be very sort of, they have to find something else almost.
Exactly.
So like a really good example that did very well was something like Jojo Rabbit.
Sure.
Instead hit on the need of a young boy to feel like he belonged.
Exactly. Right. It's that famous, it gets also at that famous Stanley Kubrick quote, if you've ever heard that one, where he says, you can't make a movie about the Holocaust, right? Because the Holocaust is about 6 million people dying, right? And that's why you get things like Schindler's List, which is not about the Holocaust. It's about someone who saves people from the Holocaust.
Yes.
Right? You always have to go about it in some kind of, not, I don't want to say tangential, that's not quite the right word, but from a sideways glance almost. Because if you look at it,
you have to find a
directly.
Framing device.
Exactly.
Like you have to find it's the thing of it's the abyss. Like we can't stare directly into the abyss.
Mm-hmm.
We can't handle that.
Yeah.
So instead, you have to dress it up and you have to give it a hero's journey. You have to give it recognizable elements.
Exactly.
You can't just say, this is it. We did, like, this happened. Humanity as a species was responsible for the death of over 6 million of a specific people in a focused act of genocide.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And at the time that he was writing it, it still wasn't revealed the scope of this, right? This would have been published in 44, so he would have written it in 43 or something like that. So
yeah.
It was just starting to come out.
Yeah, they knew that they were in ghettos, but that was about it.
Yeah, right. So all of these poems come out, and the Rocking Chair, right, like I said, won the Governor General's Award. It is considered to be kind of his poetic high point. As far as Klein is concerned, it is institutionally recognized as a great series of poems. I actually have an edition of this one, a first edition copy of The Rocking Chair and Other Poems, which I cherish. And it's one of those. Have you ever seen those copies? This is me like just being happy that I have these copies. What we call uncut copies. Do you know what I'm talking about? No. So old books, you don't see this anymore in the era of mass paperback editions. Old books, like pre-World War II or right around World War II even, you kept doing that. Some of the pages were stuck together and you had to cut them with like a letter opener in order to read the whole thing. And this was a way for publishers and booksellers to prove that it was still an unsold copy and an unused copy. Right, of a text. And so the copy that I have is one of those copies. It was a copy that never been opened, and that was like still in pristine edition.
Yeah, I've got a couple of old books pre-World War II, but
they would have been cut.
Yeah, one's a collected works of Shakespeare.
Yeah,
and the other is the Merry Musings of Walt Whitman.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah, it's like one of 100 copies.
Sure.
It's just the most. It's just sex poems. I can't, like, there's no other way. I keep it. It was a gift from my grandfather, and I think he got it from his grandfather, who brought it with him to the trenches.
Oh wow! Okay, one of those
as something to read for like entertainment at the darkest times.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, that's really good.
Oh, it's like 1870 something, or yeah.
Oh wow.
Hold on. You can keep talking, giving historical, but now I have to take a look at this because it's going to drive
Sure. Just mute yourself. So, Klein would go on to have some kind of political career, but mostly failed. Right? He tried to run for the CCF in the 1940s. At a time when he was also a lecturer in the English department at McGill. And in part, that was possible thanks to his connections with Samuel Bronfman, who was a prominent financial supporter of McGill. And Bronfman wanted Klein to stay in Montreal rather than go to New York. And so was very much encouraged that Klein stay in the city right? And one of those ways was to offer him a lectureship position at McGill, which he accepted. The CCF career, I don't want to mention it very often because it was, or very much because it was a disaster. He lost, he was trounced in an election. So I'm mentioning this as like historical fact, but he didn't really do
Back
much.
in the days when artists and celebrities were not politicians.
Right. Or people didn't accept it as such. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So I found it, not for maids, ministers, or striplings, the Merry Muses, a choice collection of favorite songs gathered from many sources by Robert Burns. It wasn't Whitman, it was Burns.
Okay.
Privately printed, not for sale, 1827.
Privately printed. That's great.
Only 99 copies printed.
Wow.
This book is, yeah.
That's a treasure.
It's probably one of my favorite, yeah. It's one of the favorite things I have.
Of course.
And the poems are very crazy.
For sure. So yeah, I wanted to spend. I know we've already been talking for almost an hour and a half on this topic, or an hour on this topic. So
yeah,
and I know you're tired.
You gotta go grocery shopping.
The real important stuff. But I do want to spend some time on what could be broadly considered the second half of Klein's writing career.
He wrote Sestinas.
Yes.
A fucking madman. Jesus Christ.
Explain why that is a mad thing to do.
It's not a bad thing. It's just like
a mad thing.
It's a mad thing. So it's a sestina it's a very specific type of poem. It's 6 stanzas, 6 lines, a 3-line at the end. And then it's oh my god. It's like it has a mathematical sequence to it because the 6 end words of the first stanza rotate in a specific pattern for each of the following ones. And it's not like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6, 1, 5, 2, 4, 3, 3, 6, 4, 1, 2, 5, 5, 3, 2, 6, 1, 4, 4, 5, 1, 3, 6, 2, 2, 4, 6, 5, 3, 1. I wrote one back in high school because like I was given the option for a creative writing class, and I was like, I was an arrogant little dickhead, and I thought I would. And my English teacher, my creative writing teacher, was like, "Fucking joke's on you, man. You have to now, you have to do math for your creative writing homework."
You bitch.
Did
it work?
Yeah, it was a good poem. It still worked. It was about a word that I made up. But it's like it was patented absurdity. So if he was writing multiple sestinas,
he certainly he wrote some.
It's the poet's poem.
Yeah, exactly. Very
Except
much represents a shift both in his interest, right? Where this is the time of Eliot, Auden, Dylan Thomas, right? So on.
Into the wastelands.
Right, and very much thinking about form as a means to explore poetics. Right, form is front and center for the moderns, and so he's very much interested in taking that up with the use of the sestina, but also, as we were mentioning earlier, numerology is very important for a lot of Jewish traditions. And so you start to see Klein's further and further interest in the Kabbalah, and Jewish mysticism, and even political movements like Hegel or Marx, both on a personal and poetic level. And so that's kind of when you mention the Sestina, and he has a work called Sestina on the Dialectic, which brings these two streams of interest together in a bad way. And so, so it's during this time, right, that he would actually, with the support of the Canadian Jewish Congress, go on a fact-finding trip to Israel, right, or what would become Israel. So Klein, we were talking about this earlier in the episode in a joking manner, was there at ground zero, so to speak, or at the beginnings of what now becomes the state of Israel.
Mm.
So he was there. He went to Jewish refugee camps in Europe and North Africa, and was tasked by the Canadian Jewish Congress to kind of think about the possibilities of a state like Israel.
Mm.
So very, yeah, I guess now with the benefit of hindsight, there would probably be some criticism of something like this, but it's interesting that he, right, that he wouldn't have thought necessarily on those levels, right?
Yeah.
He wouldn't have, as far as I know, Klein had good politics. He wouldn't have necessarily thought about it in the genocidal sense, right? He was trying to react to what had been done to his own people, and trying to think through that on his own journey, right, to Europe and North Africa and so on. And his most famous novel, which is called The Second Scroll, and has been republished since its publication. It's always had some kind of publication presence, right, in Canada, was in part inspired by that trip to Europe and the refugee camps and so on. And it's very complex, like stylistically, of course, but also structurally, it's an ambitious work. And basically is an expression of Klein's thinking through the idea of Zionism.
Mm.
In the most basic sense of the term, of like having a Jewish state. And of course, as you would expect, even though he read it 20 years prior, he was very much inspired by his reading of Ulysses. The Second Scroll is a much shorter work than Ulysses. It's maybe 150 pages. I'd have to find my copy of it. It's maybe 150 pages. It's very short, very dense, but you see this kind of cyclical, modernistic, highly interpretative, and self-referential influence from Ulysses. And in fact, Klein was working on a commentary on Ulysses at the same time, even though that commentary would have never been finished. Yeah, had you ever read The Second Scroll, or have you ever heard of it as a text? I'm curious.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, interesting. So yeah, basically the way that it's organized, there are 5 chapters that parallel the 5 books of the Pentateuch, which is a religious text in the Jewish tradition, and they also parallel what are called glosses, right? Anyway, it's a very circuitous and mystical text, right? And a lot of it, to me personally, reading it as someone who is not familiar with Jewish heritage that extensively, I find it a very difficult work, right? Like, I find Ulysses much less difficult because I'm more familiar with the Irish history that goes behind it. Reading the Second Scroll,
the Odyssey.
Yeah, I think half of it misses me, right? Like, really not for me. I'm sure I could look into it more. Actually, I know I could look into it more. I've never taken the time to, and so it's just a very difficult text for me to talk about.
Well, and I think that speaks to a lot. That speaks so much to that's the through line for a lot of Klein's work is you really sort of have to understand the history of Hebrew, the Jewish people, and all these sorts of things to really understand what he is trying to do. I mean, even if you start looking again, the man wrote a Sistina. We look at the rhyming scheme of his. Somebody who's very interested in the form of things.
Yeah.
And the numerology behind it and all these other things. And numerology is a big part of Hebrew and all these other things. So there's a lot of layers going on right now.
Yeah, sure. And it's one of those things where I can appreciate a writer who does that. He's like, no, you have to do the work. right? I'm presenting my own vision of this artistically, but I'm not going to hold your hand while doing it, right? And I think that works with the theme of the text, right? Which is at the end of the day about a narrator's search, right? The narrator's search that mirrors a kind of messianic yearning for the exiles, um, and kind of parallels this dialectical history that Klein and his people have illustrated throughout time. Um, and at the end of the day, I saw one critic say that, like Ulysses, it's an optimistic text, despite some kind of lulls in the text, as you would expect from any kind of narrative. At the end of the day, it's one that does see hope for the Jewish people in the future, which I think is really good. And I do recommend that people read it. I think it's a worthy text of exploration if you want a complete understanding of the Canadian Jewish experience. Right? However, unfortunately for Klein, he would kind of dwindle in his writing output after the publication of the Second Scroll in the late 40s. He started to show signs of psychological distress. There were actually many suicide attempts by Klein in the mid 50s. And even though he did recover partially, he would become more and more reclusive, right? He gave up his law practice, his editorship of the Chronicle, the Jewish Chronicle, and he basically avoided any contact with anyone except his family, ceased to write altogether. And he kind of died in isolation, actually, at the end of the day. And so despite this yearning towards betterment, it seems like he never quite achieved it, right, on a personal level. Or it was always something that was out of his grasp, right? He always did feel like this kind of exile at the end of the day. But I don't want to end on a low note, right? No, but because I don't think that's productive. He did have a major influence on the writers around him, both in a contemporary sense, right, as being part of the modernist circles of Canada, and broadly speaking. But also, other Jewish writers like Henry Kreisel would later go on to write short stories called the Almost Meeting, which testifies to the impact, the devastating impact that Klein's premature silence had on a generation of younger Jewish Canadian writers. Right, Klein, at the end of the day, was the most successful example that they had at this point, right, as a community, of someone who could be successful and both critically and commercially as a poet and writer. And he just kind of let himself go into the shadows. And that has a huge impact on any kind of community when that happens. And Kreisel's meditation on that is really powerful if readers want to look into it. What was I going to say? Yeah, I mentioned this earlier, but I'll bring it back. Klein is often considered by Canadian literary historians as really the person who provided a stimulus to the next generation of Jewish writers in Montreal and Canada. I mentioned earlier Mordecai Richler and Leonard Cohen, but you can think of Miriam Waddington, Seymour Main, Irving Layton. All of these people would come up as Jewish writers, both explicitly or not, that were inspired by Klein's success. So we cannot end on a negative note necessarily here, because it is a notable legacy to have, both as a literary figure and just a cultural icon in that sense.
Well, I think it's less a dark note and more an enduring one when you sort of speak, because it's hard to land on a lot of high light notes when you're speaking about anything related to sort of Jewish culture and its relation to history. But it is important to recognize the enduring quality of it, and the enduring quality of works like Klein's, and how they sort of continue to carry forward this hope, this belief, things will be better, things will, the darkest before the dawn, blah, blah, all that kind of sort of stuff.
Yeah. For sure. At the end of the day, is he a writer that you would be interested in reading more of? I know you're not like much of a poetry reader, but from like his
No,
novel
but
or
for
anything
something
like
like
that,
this, I think I probably would.
yeah.
Simply because there's such a tie to history there, and I think it's really interesting to look at.
Right. Good. Anything else you want to add? I know we've been going on for a while on this one.
No, it's okay. Sorry, I got distracted by this book that I have. Well, because I learned that it says 1827, but that was done on purpose. It was most likely actually printed 1872
Okay.
to confuse publishers because it was illicit erotica that was not supposed to be seen.
That's funny. That's really funny.
Only 99 copies.
Hmm.
Apparently, something like this would be like, it's worth like $750.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. It's almost priceless just because it's so.
Oh, I'm never selling
so
this thing.
personal.
This thing
No,
is
exactly.
so like precious, and the history and the story behind it is so important, blah blah blah.
Yeah. Good.
But in that same way, talking about this and legacy, tying it all together, and I think that is more the intangible, even tying it back to when we were talking about a soul, that invaluable, intangible part of Klein. It's for somebody who it was so important to him. Now he is regarded as such an important figure in of himself to that enduring culture and tradition.
Absolutely.
And that's why it is. I don't know. I find it's because when you're looking at artists and art, there really is something interesting to see between the ones who really dedicate themselves and say, this is part of my legacy, like I am part of this thing. And then the ones who are, no, I am wholly my own. I'm wholly my own original thing.
Yeah.
And the navigation between that,
Yeah. Because he was clearly aware of the concept of legacy. He constantly references other authors, right? Jewish and not. But yeah, you see it so clearly that he wants to be his own person.
But he wants to take part in the Jewish tradition of storytelling.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's sort of what I mean. Those creators like James Joyce, again, like, I'm going to write about Dublin. I'm going to make stories about, I'm going to be the Irish author.
Yeah.
Versus ones who are like, I couldn't really care less if people know me for being British or Irish or whatever. I just want them to know like me as an individual.
Klein, I think, is also interesting because he's one of those rare or earlier authors that you still see read in like CanLit classes. Right. I'm preparing a CanLit class in the fall, and I haven't formally put him into the syllabus, but I could see so many ways in which I could. And I think
you could do a week on Jewish writing in Canada, and you'd have to.
Of course.
You would do him, Mordecai Richler, like.
Yeah, right, exactly. So there's, and I think just that ability or the fact that is so obvious to people who would construct classes in CanLit shows his enduring legacy, right, as a figure. Right? And there are obviously problems with this kind of canonization, right? I'm not saying otherwise, but it's such a clear demonstration of his enduring quality that it wouldn't even be surprising to put him in a class like this. Yeah. All right. Shall we call it there?
I think we shall call it there.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you want to support us on Patreon, you can. No worries if not. We should record another episode of Pop Canada soon.
We will. I have been thinking about it.
Good.
And that's what I appreciate about it.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening and sharing and doing all that good stuff. And we'll see you hopefully next week. I don't know.
Hopefully we get a little bit more on top of our shit.
Yeah.
I'm going to the races next week, so we'll see how I'm doing.
Okay, cool. All right, catch you on the flip side, everyone. Cheers.
Cheers.
Marketing is hard. But I'll tell you a little secret. It doesn't have to be. Let me point something out. You're listening to a podcast right now, and it's great. You love the host. You seek it out and download it. You listen to it while driving, working out, cooking, even going to the bathroom. Podcasts are a pretty close companion. And this is a podcast ad. Did I get your attention? You can reach great listeners like yourself with podcast advertising from Libsyn Ads. Choose from hundreds of top podcasts offering host endorsements, or run a pre-produced ad like this one across thousands of shows to reach your target audience in their favorite podcasts with Libsyn Ads. Go to libsynads.com, that's Libsyn, ads.com today.